This is what we call hotel playoff. Called it playoff tiers for the better part of the first weeks of the season. We're no longer doing that. Why? Because that's freaking lame. Playoff tiers, everyone has playoff tiers. Tired, playoff tiers. Wired, hotel playoff. So let's get wired here. We got the playoff penthouse. We got the lobby. We got the teams that are what we would call waiting on a reservation. And then we got the G5 party, which isn't necessarily in the hotel per se, but it is sort of down the street, and they're having a good time, and they will have their chance to get into hotel playoff. So we'll unpack that right now. Let's start with playoff penthouse. These are the teams that we feel good about thus far into the college football season. College football sickos, we appreciate y'all being dialed in right here to the On3 YouTube channel. We're in week 8 of the college football season, but guess what? On this show, college football does not stop. January to December, and then we run it back. So lock in right here. Make sure you're subscribed, and we appreciate you in advance for being all the way dialed in. Texas, to me, is the team you feel best about right now as it pertains to their chances to make the college football playoff. If you beat Georgia, and they are favored right now at the crib to beat Georgia, if they get that done, also I'll say we've picked Texas to beat Georgia. It's not a cakewalk, but it is a bit of a sprint to the finish. Like you finish your last hurdle. If you run the hurdles, I never ran hurdles in my life, but whenever I watch it on TV, this is how it looks. You finish that last hurdle, and you are just guts the rest of the way trying to get to that finish line. Because Georgia's the last test on your schedule. Like, yes, you got to go to Vandy. Hey, shout out to Vandy now. Nashville. I'll just say Nashville's a bit of a college football town now. Don't look now. You got to go to Arkansas, Taylor Green and company, Kentucky, at A&M. But, like, to be real, you could drop one of those games. You don't want to drop any of those games, especially the last one. You could drop a game and still find yourself very comfortably in hotel playoff. Could drop one of those games, and I believe still somewhat comfortably find yourself in Atlanta playing for a bye the first round of the college football playoff. So Texas, argue with the wall, they're in the playoff penthouse. Oregon, same deal. If there was any questions about what Oregon was this year, they just silenced all those this past week against Ohio State. For them, you just got to keep walking this tightrope, baby. Now, you're undefeated, so there's a little more width on that rope that you're walking. You still have Illinois. You got to go to Michigan. No Penn State. No USC. To be real, that Michigan game I just spoke to a second ago looks a heck of a lot more winnable than it did before the season started. The thing for Oregon is they have to be able to handle success well, because I think early on in the year, I don't know if it was they were gelling or they were still maybe trying to find their own identity. I think they found it now, but we've seen so many teams, man, massive win, have a tricky spot coming up, and then drop a game they're not supposed to drop. I don't think that'll be Oregon. Just between you and me, I think Dan Lanning is the epitome of dialed in. I would venture the over-under for him is somewhere between 6.5 cups of coffee a day. Like, he's wired. Got to go and play Purdue this Friday night. Friday night, things that happen can be a little bit counterintuitive. However, I think Oregon's a playoff team, and I don't think that's a hot take. I do think you probably play Ohio State at the end of the year, again in the Big Ten title game for a bye. But again, if Oregon shows up in Indy with 0 losses from the regular season, that's a game for seeding. It's not for a chance to make the college football playoff. How about Ohio State? Yep, still in the penthouse. JD, they lost to Oregon. I know, but they're letting 12 teams in the dance. You're telling me there's 12 teams better than Ohio State? I don't think so. Ohio State could play Oregon again, lose again in the Big Ten title game. Not a prediction, more of a hypothetical, and they'd still be in the dance. Here's the thing for Ohio State. They just can't have that Oregon game be their peak. Because, I mean, watching that game, if you think Oregon is one of the great teams in college football, I would agree with you. But Ohio State losing by 1 point, does that really disqualify the Buckeyes from anything we thought about them going into the year? The defense gives you some concern. I thought Joel Klatt had a really insightful breakdown on the Ohio State defense. His take was, hey, they played good defense for several snaps in a row. They just got some of these misalignments or breakdowns that you can't have that equate to big plays, which equate to points. So I thought that was fascinating. Ohio State obviously has to up the level of play defensively if they play Oregon again. But that was never the question for Ohio State, right? Like, you always trust the personnel for Ohio State on defense. The question is, could Will Howard be that guy to get you to where you want to go? 300 yards, 80% completion percentage, 3 total touchdowns, used his legs really well. Clock ran out. Effort play didn't go your way. Are we sure Will Howard is really the issue here? to me, if he consistently plays at that level the rest of the way, Ohio State will find themselves not just in the Big Ten title game, they have a very good chance to find themselves in Atlanta. Defense got to pick it up, though. Now, Georgia. Yep, still in playoff penthouse. Yes, they lost to Alabama. I get it, but with the new 12-team model, they're going to be right there in the mix, especially if they can beat Texas this weekend. However, if you drop this game to Texas, if you do, forget about this. But if you drop this game to Texas, it starts to feel a little bit like a scratchy wool sweater. Like you were kind of comfortable, but the more you wear it, the more that you keep it on your body, things become a little bit more just uncomfortable and irritating because you still have to play at Ole Miss and Tennessee with 2 losses. 10-2, you're already a little bit like, we'll see. Now, granted, 10-2 to what would have been 2 more or less top 3, top 5 football teams, probably in good shape, the best 10-2, quote unquote, in the country. But still, 9-3. With a loss to one of those 2 teams, I don't think you get in. I don't. So, Georgia, just stay the course. Do what you do. I say this a lot. I think Georgia's just going to continue to trend upward. I do, because why? That's what Kirby Smart teams do. We picked Texas, but the more that I sit with this, it would be the most 2024 college football season thing ever for Georgia to walk into Austin and get a win there. So, we'll see what happens, but Georgia, even if they drop a game to Texas, they're probably still in the playoff, but just worth noting, they don't have a cakewalk the rest of the way. How about Iowa State? Hey, clap it up for Iowa State right now, man. Iowa State just hanging in there, man. Unbeaten. I've said many times the Big 12 is the most confusing / exciting conference in America right now. We'll talk more about them later. Iowa State is like that cinematic shot you see after like a battle scene or a natural disaster, just a hand reaching out from the rubble, from the debris. That's Iowa State right now. They're not the only unbeaten team in the Big 12, but to me, they've been the most impressive. Handled business against West Virginia in what I thought was a really interesting / sneaky spot. West Virginia had the coal miner unis on. It was what it was. Iowa State, they're unbeaten. They're rolling. Right now, I think they should be your rep for the college football playoff from the Big 12 conference. The ACC is fascinating. I got 2 teams in the playoff penthouse from the ACC. You say, JD, 2 teams? Yep, 2 teams. We'll talk about them both right now. Miami, I think they'll probably drop a football game somewhere. Now, who is that to? I don't know. But even if they drop a football game, I don't know where they lose a second. And I think that 11-1, 1 will get you to Charlotte. 2, if you get to Charlotte with only 1 loss, I think you're a college football playoff caliber team. Now, the Clemson game, if they do play Clemson in the ACC, is a whole other discussion. But I just think that right now, looking at Miami, looking at Cam Ward, looking at that roster potential, when they're on, when they put it together, we've seen what they can be. Now, the unfortunate part, if you're a Miami fan, you've seen it 2 games in a row in a comeback effort. You're happy to win the football game. It's not a reliable way to win consistently. So we'll keep an eye on Miami. Again, I think they'll drop one somewhere just based on how they've looked against Cal and Va Tech. But Cam Ward is the just psychopath of college football. I think he wills Miami into the college football playoff. And right now, I have no reason to believe otherwise when it comes to where they will be at the end of the regular season. I think they'll be in Charlotte. Now, again, I've said this before. I think they'll meet Clemson in Charlotte. Now, Clemson has not been without a good stress test here. Played Georgia week 1. It was what it was. They still got to play Louisville. Got to go to Pitt. Don't look now. Pitt's unbeaten. And then obviously you have South Carolina at the end of the year. I think it's very, very easy for them to go 2-1 in that stretch. Now it has to be the right kind of 2-1 because if you drop the game to Pitt and Pitt wins out, well then Pitt's going to be in Charlotte. More on Pitt a little bit later. I just think Clemson has the chops. I really do. From what they have offensively now, I think that's the major differentiating factor for them. The big question is, can you go 2-1 in that stretch and have the one not beat a Pitt? I think you can. Notice now, nobody's talked about Dabo in the portal in a minute here. Funny how that works. Everyone was talking before the year, man, the decline of Dabo and Clemson and this and that. We were very much so, hey, need to see it to believe it. So far, Cade Klubnik's been like, hey, look at this. Look at our offense just humming. And not just humming from a points perspective, they're explosive offensively. Last time I checked, Cade Klubnik was somewhere in the range of like 8 yards a pass. Y'all, they were, I think I want to say a good 2 yards below that a season ago. They were one of the worst in America. Garrett Riley's got the pan out. They're cooking. Cade Klubnik adding the sauce. The skill players in the perimeter doing their part. I'm just saying now, Clemson, look out for the Tigers. I would be fired up to see Miami and Clemson in Charlotte. Again, the portal buzz kind of turned down a little bit. Interesting. Penn State. Do I think Penn State is better than every team that we're about to talk about here in our college football playoff lobby? I don't. I also think that if you were to put them on a neutral site with some of those teams in the lobby, the other teams will be favored. And they did not look as impressive as you would want them to look against USC. Like you would like it to be just bully ball domination. We said going into that game, hey, Penn State, if you are the bully in the Big Ten, go do bully things. And they won the game. It took a little bit of extra effort. It took a 14-point comeback. No such thing as a bad win. You come back 14 down when being down 14 a year ago was a death sentence. Bravo. Let's keep it rolling. The reason why they're in the playoff penthouse for me is like I think 2 losses would be enough to make you concerned if you're a Penn State fan about your chances to make the college football playoff. Show me where that 2 losses are coming from. Like Ohio State, okay, that'll be a good game. Let's just say for the sake of this conversation, they dropped that game. Where's the second loss coming from? Wisconsin? I don't think so. Washington? Last time I checked, Kalen DeBoer and Michael Penix Jr. are no longer there. Minnesota? No, I don't think so. All good football teams, better than Penn State? No. So could Penn State have 2 losses and make it interesting? Sure. Do I think that happens? Probably not. So Penn State for me in the playoff penthouse as of this week. Now let's move on to the lobby. And if you're just tuning in, this is probably a little bit confusing. The lobby for us in a hotel playoff is teams that I think are very much so still in it. If you were to redo your college football playoff projections as of right now, you could make a case for having any of these teams still in the mix. In fact, on our college football playoff predictions we did last Thursday, we had one of these teams in it. But where things stand right now, it's still so much still very much okay. Need you to prove it a little bit for me here. I don't doubt you, but I do need to see you execute the way that we think and believe you can execute. Now Alabama's in the lobby right now. They were in playoff penthouse the last couple of weeks. Moved them down after the game against South Carolina. The reason why I just got a little bit scared. I mean, we can be honest here. We try to be very vulnerable on this show. Bama scares me a little bit right now. And the reason why they scare me is because they lost to Vanderbilt. Okay, cool. Not cool, but like, okay, happens. Yeah, new college football. Diego Pavia is just like, phenomenal for Vanderbilt. Okay, it is what it is. Everybody has a bad game. Unfortunately for Bama, their bad game equated to a loss. The thing that scares me is you had South Carolina at the crib, and they looked very Vanderbilt-ish in the way that they executed against you. Like, I'm not here to tell you I know all of the scheme and I know all the X's and O's of how things are operating for Alabama offensively and defensively, but it did look a lot like, to me, South Carolina was following the Vanderbilt blueprint and having success. So when I look to the future here, Vanderbilt got theirs against Bama. Bama struggled with the Vandy blueprint against South Carolina. Going forward, no shade to Vandy, most teams Alabama plays are going to have better players than Vanderbilt. So if they can hit the shots, Alabama is very gettable right now. Second thing that made me nervous about Bama, typically under the Nick Saban regime, you would have seen Alabama lose a football game, probably not to Vanderbilt, but I digress. They would lose a football game, turn around, and just absolutely donkey stomp whoever was in their path next, especially in Tuscaloosa. I was waiting for that. That never happened. And so while I think this team still has some Saban-esque traits within them, I need to see it. So there's a path there for Bama now. Do not get it twisted. If they beat Tennessee this week and they look impressive doing so, who's to say we don't move them back up to the penthouse? But there's enough data now, enough of the eye test to concern me about how Alabama looks thus far. Right now, they definitely have a chance to be in the college football playoff, but from what we've seen, I'm going to brace for impact a little bit and go ahead and put them in the lobby. Now, on the other side of things, we put Bama from the penthouse to the lobby. We moved LSU up from waiting on a reservation up to the lobby. I think LSU, when you look at what they have the rest of the way, you can make a case for them winning or losing every game they have left. Like at Arkansas. This weekend, we picked them to win. If Taylor Green puts on the cape and LSU's defense looks how they did in that first half against South Carolina, okay, we got a ball game here. At A&M. Which A&M do we see? Which LSU do we see? Alabama. They got to come to Death Valley. That'll be a fun one. Brian Kelly, undefeated in Death Valley at night. At Florida. I know Florida's Florida right now, but you got DJ Lagway. You sprinkle in a little bit of the unknown variable. We'll see what happens there. You got to go to the Swamp. Vanderbilt, again, Vandy beat Bama. You're telling me they can't beat someone else of a high profile? I'm just saying. Then Oklahoma's got problems. But again, Michael Hawkins Jr., Brent Venables, good defense. So here's the thing. The reason why I have them in the lobby is, of all those games I just mentioned, where you can make a case for LSU winning or losing that football game, can you find a way to only drop one of those? Because if that happens and you have a loss week 1 to USC, and then you have a 1-loss record in the SEC, so 10-2 if we're keeping track at home here, I think that'd be enough to get LSU in. Now, it's a steep climb based on that record that you have to get in that schedule I just mentioned, but if LSU is able to continue to progress with the difficulty of their schedule, they're going to be in good shape. Garrett Nussmeier, Gumbo Gunslinger, he is living up to that nickname we have given him on this show. We asked him at SEC Media Days if he liked it. He said yes, so we're running with it, all right? So LSU in the mix in the lobby as of right now. Here's one team nobody thought would be in the discussion, I don't believe, at the beginning of the season at least. Hand up, we didn't. The Hoosiers, baby. Not the basketball movie, but Indiana. Y'all, they're unbeaten right now. They're 6.5-point favorites with Big Noon coming to the crib, and they're hosting Nebraska. Indiana, they are, from what I understand, extremely confident, have a swagger about themselves. Kurt Signetti was on Andy and Ari on 3 this morning, so another reason to subscribe to the On 3 YouTube channel. Go lock in over there. But they got them believing right now. Belief is a dangerous thing for a team to have. Not for that team, but more so for the opponent. Now, again, Nebraska this week, I think they'll have their work cut out for them. The thing with Indiana is I think they probably have to go 11-1 to make the playoff. But with only a loss to Ohio State, if that's the only blemish on their record, I think that's doable. Like, Michigan isn't what you thought they were. At Michigan State, yeah, you got to go on the road, but we'll see. Nebraska is a major hurdle for them this week. We'll see what they do. But Indiana, by nature of their record, I think you got to put them in the lobby right now when it comes to the college football playoff. Texas A&M, they're in the lobby for me this week. I believe they'll make the playoff. I said that previously on last Thursday's show. I still feel that way. I think that the formula they're working with right now is repeatable because of what they have in the trenches. They got their work cut out for them. There's no way around it. The road games probably worry me the most. LSU, obviously, at home is going to be a great test, but the game at Auburn. I know it's Auburn. Auburn's got their own problems, but just Hugh Freeze's team. They get up for games like that. At South Carolina, again, makes you a little bit nervous. The reality is you could drop the game either to LSU or to Texas as long as you don't drop both and you win the rest of your road games. And I think you're in the college football playoff. Now, here's the big takeaway for me when we talk about A&M. I want us to really have a conversation about this. There is now for Texas A&M something there wasn't under the Jimbo Fisher regime. And this is not me trying to dunk on Jimbo Fisher, but when you watch A&M play football, it is clear there is a real identity with them. That's why you brought Mike Elko in. And typically you don't see that identity really permeate throughout a football team and show itself in the on-field product until year 2, year 3. Seeing this team have the identity of Mike Elko tells me there's buy-in, tells me there is real good cohesion within that team. Because right now they are physical, they are disciplined, they are aggressive, they play line of scrimmage football, and they win line of scrimmage football. That's why you brought Mike Elko in, to be all those things. And to see it translate so quickly, I think is encouraging, obviously, for this year. You're in the college football playoff conversation in Week 8. That in itself is a win. But talk about the future at A&M, talk about the trajectory right now of what they're doing. I would have to believe the habits of A&M internally are championship-level habits. I'm excited to see what they are in the future. I'm not telling you they're winning the SEC in the future, they win the national championship, but to have everything they have going for them right now so early on, trajectory and direction should tell us a lot, and the direction of A&M is phenomenal from what I can tell. So this week for us, they're in the college football playoff lobby. So that's the lobby. We've talked through the penthouse and the lobby. Those are the two tiers, obviously, by nature of them being near the top of hotel playoff, that you should feel most optimistic about your chances for the college football playoff. Now, here's where it gets a little bit more messy. Here are the teams that are, for me at least, waiting on a reservation. These are the teams that got to hit Expedia, got to, pull up the Marriott points. Whatever you do to get your reservation, these teams got to do it. Again, they're not out of it, but they got some work to do and maybe in some sense need some help. Ole Miss needs some help. They have 2 losses now. They got to win out. You got Oklahoma. You got to go to Arkansas. You got Georgia. Now, if you can win those games in a somewhat definitive fashion and then be able to win the Georgia game, I don't care if it's by field goal or by 10 points, now we're in the discussion. 10-2 Ole Miss with losses at Death Valley and an early loss against Kentucky, you can make an argument for. But again, I think you need some help across the SEC and quite frankly the college football landscape to find yourself into the playoff there. Now, Notre Dame, JD, Notre Dame only got 1 loss. Yeah, who's that 1 loss to? Right, G5 NIU. And people come after me for having Notre Dame in the waiting on a reservation tier right now and having A&M in the lobby. And I'm like, my man, it was week 1, first of all. Second of all, Notre Dame lost to a G5 team. Third of all, Texas A&M body bagged a top 10 team like a couple of weeks ago. Like that should, I think, count for something, the way that you progress. So from a resume perspective, I'm a little bit worried about Notre Dame with that G5 loss. However, the A&M win should count for something. It absolutely should. I think they need to win out, is why I have them in the waiting on a reservation. Because the playoff walls, I think, are starting to shrink a little bit on their path. You got to go to Georgia Tech this week. I believe that game actually is in Mercedes-Benz, so that'll be a good time. Heck yeah, that'll be a good time. Georgia Tech, yeah, you said it, at Georgia Tech? It's neutral, yeah, okay, but I think it's in Mercedes-Benz, so I think it'll be, yeah, okay, Nick and I are having a conversation off to the side here, keeping me correct. So I appreciate that, Nick. Yeah, so Mercedes-Benz, Georgia Tech. You would believe it's mostly Georgia Tech fans, with it still being in Atlanta, still a road game of sorts. I mean, Georgia Tech's taking like a 15-minute bus ride. Notre Dame's got to get on a plane, you'd have to believe. So with that being said, you also have to play Navy at MetLife and Army at Yankee Stadium. Navy and Army now, we got them in the G5 party, 2 wagons, 2 operations out there. Bryson Daly for Army giving out military-grade stiff arms. More on the folks out at West Point here in a little bit. But the bottom line here is you have those, and then you have USC. Can you go undefeated into that stretch? Maybe you'll be favored in every game, but I don't know that I would pick you to win every game. Again, I want to trust. I want to believe. Marcus Freeman's one of my favorite coaches in all of college football. You heard me speak, so glowingly of Jeremiah Love and Mike Denbrock. Riley Leonard has got to put it all together. Done a good job for the most part here going forward, but it's been hot and cold. I don't know what to believe just yet. Tennessee, hey, only lost 1 game. Totally true. But you have Bama this week in Knoxville. Get a win there. That changes the discussion for sure. But you also have Georgia. You also have Kentucky. Heck, going to Vanderbilt. It's funny how much Vanderbilt is factoring into this equation. But they factor in nonetheless. And I think you can only drop one of those. Like 10-2 Tennessee, it's a discussion, especially if you get a win over Georgia and Bama, and then maybe you can drop a Kentucky. I don't know how it works out. The reason why I have them in the waiting on a reservation tier outside of the schedule is the offense is making me nervous. Like, the offense was ripping and rolling early on in the year. Totally true. But then the level of difficulty, level of competition improved, and we've seen the offense kind of stall out. Now, I think it's also fair to say, hey, is Heupel calling the offense a little bit differently because he has a defense to lean on for the first time since he's been at Tennessee? That's a fair question to ask. It's totally a fair assessment to have. But I need to see a little bit more juice from the offense. We should not be in overtime with Florida. No shade on Florida. I get it's a weird game, weird rivalry. I understand all that. I need to see Tennessee kick it up a notch offensively. If they do, bam, up in the lobby, find your way in the penthouse, awesome. But right now, got him in the waiting on a reservation spot. Pitt? Yeah, Pitt. The Panthers. Yeah, the Fighting Narduzzi's. They still have some tricky ones left, but y'all, they're unbeaten. Like, yes, you got Syracuse, you got to go to SMU, you got Clemson, you got at Louisville. That's going to be a really tough gauntlet to run. But they're at least in the discussion of hotel playoff. I want to highlight someone too. Offensive coordinator for Pitt right now, Cade Bell, one of the younger OCs in all of America, has the boys buzzing. Eli Holstein, remember that name? Quarterback from Alabama, now at Pitt. Y'all, they're averaging 34 points a game. Pitt can and will score. So unbeaten right now. Got to probably get a few more quality dubs on the resume before we move you up. But you got to talk about Pitt now when it comes to the college football playoff discussion, because obviously if they win the ACC, they're going to get a bye in the first round of the college football playoff. Heck, if they beat Clemson, can you imagine that? If they find themselves beating Clemson and maybe they find themselves in Charlotte, crazier things have happened. Playing good ball right now out there at Pitt. So they're definitely in the playoff discussion. They are waiting on a reservation. We did this exercise last week. I want to do it one more time. The Big 12, man, it's a mess. It is an absolute mess. You got 3 teams with 0 losses. We already mentioned Iowa State. They're in that discussion, as well as BYU and Texas Tech. I think Iowa State is the best of those 3, so therefore they're in the playoff penthouse. Then you got a handful of teams with 1 loss in the conference. Again, the 0 loss discussion was speaking to the Big 12 conference for clarity. But then you have all these teams with 1 loss in conference. West Virginia, Cincinnati, Colorado, Arizona State, Kansas State. God bless the Big 12. God bless, everyone who has to figure that mess out. I don't even want to know what that whole tiebreaker situation would look like. It is Hunger Games, like we said it would be. I think you get 1 team in. Obviously, I think it's the 1 team that wins the conference, clearly, but I don't think you get an at-large bid is the point in saying that. So those teams for me are all waiting on a reservation, and God bless the Big 12, bringing the chaos. True to the 2024 season, the Big 12 providing chaos, and you love to see it. Now let's take a look at the G5 party. And the G5, man, they're not stressing they're not stressing your at-large bids. They're not stressing your college game day destination. They're not stressing your Heisman Trophy race, though Ashton Genty actually, I think, is the leader in the clubhouse right now for that. They're just worried about winning their conference and having a chance to be that team from the G5 that makes it in. Right now, there's 2 conferences that stick out the most in terms of attention towards the G5, and have to get my guy Caden Smith back in here, Cato, to unpack where things are in the G5. We'll do that in our 12-seed segment here coming up pretty soon, probably tomorrow if I had to guess. Talk to Caden on that. The Mountain West and the American are the 2 conferences I'm watching like a hawk right now. Boise State and UNLV from the Mountain West, Army and Navy. Army and Navy. Yes, I said that. Clearly, and that's correct. That's not some kind of error that I have on the show right now. Those 2 teams are 1, ranked, and 2, if one of those teams wins the American, let's say they do it with, 0 losses, they're your team in the college football playoff, and that would be absolutely magical. Would be really curious to get Cato's thoughts here on if it's a Boise State with a 1 loss to Oregon, or undefeated Army who beat Navy twice, or vice versa if Navy beats Army twice. At the end of the day here, it's going to be phenomenal. Boise State now, they're off this week. That's crucial. Why? Because they got to go to UNLV on a Friday night next week. Now, UNLV, they're at Oregon State. And I just mentioned Boise State comes to town next week. That'll be a major fork in the road, high-impact kind of G5 game, and obviously high impact within the Mountain West. Worth noting, both those teams will play San Diego State. San Diego State now, no losses in the conference. So keep tabs on the Aztecs. Now, Liberty's in this discussion. I think they need some help. I think they need some carnage, because you look at Liberty's schedule and I'm like, dude, I don't know where the hey, put me in the playoff kind of win is. I don't know where the pick me win is if you're Liberty. And again, I said this last week, I'll say it again. Andy Staples, before the year started, said Liberty will run the table, be undefeated, and they'll miss the college football playoff. Sounded wild. I was like, I don't know about that. Right now, we're seeing it play out. So to unpack it, the G5 party is Boise State, UNLV, Liberty still hanging around, and then Navy and Army with quarterback Bryson Daly playing great football, and like I mentioned, giving out just militant stiff arms, pun intended, this past week in the college football landscape. So let's unpack this here. Let's recap this here, rather. The teams in hotel playoff right now will go penthouse down to lobby, down to who's waiting on a reservation, out to the G5 party. In the penthouse, we got the Texas Longhorns, Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Iowa State, Miami, Clemson, Penn State, and that does it for the playoff penthouse. And then in the lobby, we have got a little bit of a more thin crowd in the lobby this week. We got Alabama, LSU, Indiana, and Texas A&M. And then the teams that are trying to hit Expedia, trying to find a reservation, trying to find a deal right now, I've never used Trivago, but maybe that would be beneficial for the folks that are needing a reservation. Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Tennessee, the Big 12, God bless them. I mean, there's just a whole cast of characters there, and then Pitt as well. And the G5 party we just mentioned, Boise State, UNLV in the Mountain West, Army and Navy in the American, and then Liberty hanging out with no losses.